Hey, everybody, welcome into another episode of the Leaning Into Leadership podcast. I am so glad you're here today. Now, if you're feeling like the workload is already starting to pile up and you've got too much on your plate right now, man, you are not alone. I've got something really special for you today. We are going to dig into something that's really relevant this time of the year. We're going to talk about how to overcome the overwhelm that so many school administrators are already feeling early in the school year. Look, I get it. As school leaders, you are asked to do so much more. And often it's with fewer resources or with brand new team members who just are still finding their way. And what happens? You feel like you've got to be the superhero, that you've got to take on everything else just to keep the ship running smoothly. But here's the truth. Doing everything yourself, man, that is just a recipe for burnout. You cannot lead your school effectively if you're drowning in tasks that should be delegated. So today we're talking about practical strategies to help you reclaim your time and your energy, to help you focus on the work that truly matters and to delegate the rest. So let's not waste any time, folks. Let's dive right in. So the first thing I want to acknowledge is that as the principal, the demands on your time are immense. You are managing everything from school safety to instructional leadership to dealing with parents, dealing with community concerns. And that doesn't even cover things like email, meetings, paperwork. I mean, man, those things can make you feel like you are just running from one crisis to the next. You know, you've heard me talk about it here on the show before. It's falling into being the firefighter, right? Sound familiar? Well, here's the thing. Doing more doesn't necessarily mean that you're being more effective. This is a trap that we fall into. And honestly, doing more can actually pull us further away from the important work of leading our school. So, the first step that I want to talk about in overcoming that overwhelm is taking a really hard look at your priorities. So here we go. Step one, clarify those priorities, right? What are the maybe three most important things you need to focus on this year? Now, if you've read my book, Road to Awesome, The Journey of a Leader, you know that I focused on 6 strategies. When I worked with my leadership coach, when I found that clarity around what my priorities were, I actually identified 6 priorities that I would go and literally stand on the balcony. I call it balcony level leadership and check in on myself. Now, I'm not saying you need to have 6, right? Maybe we just start with 3, especially if you're an early career school leader, right? Maybe let's just identify 3 things. You know, maybe that's supporting your teachers in their professional development. Maybe that's improving student outcomes. Perhaps it's creating a more positive school culture, right? Identify maybe 3 things because you can't do everything, but you can do the things that matter the most. You know, one of my favorite phrases, and those who I coach hear me say it all the time, let's keep the main thing the main thing. So when you know what your priorities are, you can let go of the tasks that just flat don't align with your goals. Now, I know what you're thinking, right? But Darren, if I don't do it, who will? And that brings me to the second step. Step number 2 is delegate and trust your team. Now, I've been talking a lot about leadership teams here on the podcast for the last few weeks. It's become a real passion for me. It's become something I'm really focused on because it isn't just about the individual being successful. It's about the collective team. But as the building leader, if you're not willing to share with your team, if you're not willing to empower your team, ultimately, you're setting yourself and them up for failure, right? So here's the deal. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should be doing it. I know it can be hard to let go of tasks, especially if you feel like your team is either stretched thin or you have so many new team members that they're just not even up to speed yet. I mean, heck, my buddy here on the show, Todd Plumer, hired an assistant principal right before the school year began. There's no way that person is yet up to speed, right? But delegating isn't about passing off work because you don't have time. No, delegating is about empowering your team to take ownership and grow their roles. Yeah, think about this. Every time you delegate, you're not just getting something off your plate. You're giving someone else the opportunity to develop their skills and gain some experience. And whether that's your assistant principal, it's your office staff, or maybe it's a teacher leader, they can take those tasks off your plate that will allow them to grow, but also will allow you to focus on your big picture leadership work. When I was a high school principal, I remember several times where my leadership team and I would take a 2-day retreat, and we would just go away and really focus on getting our roles clarified, our roles and our responsibilities. We got super clear about what each one of us was responsible for and how we would hold each other accountable to that work. Now, you know what happened? We had our best school years ever. And the reason why was because everybody knew what their job was, and they were trusted to do that role. They knew that it was critical for our shared success, that they were successful in that role. Delegating wasn't just about lightening my load. It was about building a stronger, more cohesive team. Which brings me to my third point. Block your time and guard it fiercely. You've probably heard it before. I know you have if you listen to this podcast, but I can't stress it enough. Your calendar is your best tool for fighting the overwhelm. When you know what your top priorities are, you need to block them on your calendar. Block out that time for the things that truly matter the most. For me, I always did it on a Sunday. Put 10 or 15 minutes here and there, sprinkle it through the course of your week, and put those 3 things like we talked about earlier, put them on the calendar to ensure that that time gets set aside. Don't just assume that you'll have time, because trust me, you won't. Right? Set aside time for classroom walkthroughs. Set aside time to meet with your leadership team. Set aside time for strategic planning. Set aside time to check in on yourself and see, am I staying focused on my priorities? Schedule time to meet with your secretary. That is huge. That's the person who's going to guard this time for you more than anyone. Make sure you're setting time aside for that individual. Because meetings are going to pop up. Emails will come flooding in. By the way, schedule time for your emails. An absolute game changer. Put that time on your calendar. Then you know, hey, I'm going to answer emails when I get to that time on my calendar. And you don't feel like you have to do that when you're in a classroom, right? Either way, you got to stay disciplined and say no to the distractions, right? There's so many of them that are going to try and pull you away. There are those time bandits that are going to constantly come at you. But if you stay disciplined and you stay focused on your priorities, you can keep those distractions at bay. Here's a quick pro tip for you. Let your team and your staff know when you've set time aside for certain priorities. This not only keeps you accountable, but it also signals to them that that work is important and it's non-negotiable. And whether that's I'm setting time aside for the classrooms, I'm setting a time aside for this is when I'm going to answer emails, or this is time when I'm going to focus on professional growth for my leadership team. Whatever it might be, let them know these are my priorities and this is how I'm going to do it. Now, I want to leave you with this thought. As school leaders, we often feel like we have to be everything to everyone, right? It's that Superman syndrome. But the reality is your school doesn't need a superhero. What it does need is a leader who is clear, who's focused, and who's intentional about where they spend their time and their energy. When you're able to delegate, prioritize, and protect your time, you're not just avoiding burnout, you're setting your school up for success. And that's something every leader is striving for. So here's my question for you. How are you fighting the overwhelm this school year? And what steps are you taking to protect your time and to focus on what really matters? I would love to hear your thoughts. So drop me a message, or better yet, share your strategies on social media and tag me. I'm Darren M. Peppard on all platforms. Let's keep the conversation going. Let's help each other to stay focused and to fight the overwhelm. Thank you for joining me today on the Leaning Into Leadership podcast. If this episode resonated with you, be sure you share it with a colleague or a friend who might also need to hear this. And as always, if you're looking for more ways to lean into leadership and avoid that overwhelm, connect with me at roadtoawesome.net or again on social media, Darren M. Peppard, literally everywhere. Until next time, keep focused, keep intentional, keep leaning into leadership, and have a road to awesome day.